So hoping for a better year in 2021 as far as getting prescribed fire applied on the ground. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And we'll do the little virtual torch passing. I don't know if it's the same for everybody. I don't have an actual drip torch here. I just have a little one of these little Bic lighters with a long thing on it here. So we'll get going. Here's the torch. I'm going to pass this over to Andy. On my screen, he's off to this side of me, but maybe different depending on what you're seeing there. So pass this off to Andy. You got your torch?
Oh,
there he is.
I do.
He actually has a drip torch, so.
I better put this out before the wife gets mad.
There you go.
Well, thank you very much, Glenn. I really appreciate it. And I guess, you know, just definitely starting out thanking you for your service to the Prescribed Fire Council. Hopefully everyone can see this slide here. Yeah, so if you don't know me, my name is Andy Vanderyacht. I'm in the forestry department at MSU, Michigan State University, for those of you out of state. And there's my contact information. Please reach out if you have anything that you want to discuss related to the Prescribed Fire Council. I do view this as a responsibility, but I do also recognize that the way that Prescribed Fire Councils work is just kind of ad hoc in a lot of situations, and that it's basically just who's ever willing to, you know, put in that work. And so I say that because I think that, you know, hopefully there's a lot of people here that maybe have gotten interested over the past couple of days in what we stand for, what we do, and want to get more involved. And I encourage you that, you know, this is not a place for just the big agencies or even academic institutions. We want everyone in the state with an interest in prescribed fire to be involved. So our mission, as I have come to know it here, is to protect, conserve, and expand the safe use of prescribed fire on Michigan's landscape. And so that's what we're really trying to do. My background, I was a researcher at the University of Tennessee, did a lot of fire ecology stuff, published on things from bat response to bird response to vegetation, wildflowers, tree regeneration, all you know, what turned out to be beneficial effects of fire over a variety of different seasons and application methods. And so I'm originally from Michigan, so I do have that connection, but I'm bringing all of my experience in fire is kind of coming from the Southeast. So I left the state not even really, you know, being maybe just a little bit more aware of what prescribed fire was than the average person. But I'm bringing that experience back, and I'm pretty excited. So it is kind of a full circle moment for me. What I would put out as my keys to success of our organization at this moment right now are inclusivity and enthusiasm. And by that, I mean, I want everyone to know that if you have any interest in this mission to protect, conserve, and expand the safe use of prescribed fire in Michigan, we want you. We want you to be a part of our organization. We want you to contribute, and we want you to continue to attend events like this. If that's all you can really afford to contribute, that's great too. And then enthusiasm. So enthusiasm for pursuing that mission is something that I would highly encourage. And I think with those two things, we can accomplish quite a bit. And so if any of that interests you, please join us. You can do so at firecouncil.org. I would point that out to the rest of the panel members in attendance today that we have claimed to firecouncil.org. Pretty cool. I think it speaks to our age as an organization. And then also just want to let you know that, you know, my first primary mode of business in this position, I think will be taking the things that you guys bring to my attention to these larger groups of prescribed fire councils and coordinating with them. So it's pretty fitting that today is a group of prescribed fire council membership that we can all learn from. Of note, on February 17th is the Northeast Regional Prescribed Fire Council Coordinating Group meeting. And the next day is the National Meeting of Prescribed Fire Councils. And so in that vein, we will be issuing a survey via email. So please, in the next couple of days or right now, go to our website and sign up so that you can get that email, hopefully, and be able to contribute, or just email me directly. We're looking for like our top 3 issues that we can discuss as a group with those and learn from other groups as how they've dealt with that. And then finally, the next steering committee meeting for our own council is on March 2nd from 1 to 3. And if you have any interest in contributing at all, feel free to contact me or get on that group, email me, and we'll set you up and we can get you in that committee meeting. So with that, I will turn it over to Craig Meyer. And before we go any further and forget, I do want to give a quick shout out to the Joint Fire Science Program, the Tallgrass, Prairie and Oak Savannah consortium that Craig is with, based out of the University of Wisconsin. It contributes a lot to our Prescribed Fire Council and other Prescribed Fire Councils in his region, as well as Jack McGowan-Stinsky, who is just like the technical guru. He's the guy behind the scenes making this all happen with the Lake States Fire Science Consortium. Without their continued presence and involvement, I think a lot of Prescribed Fire Councils in our region would probably suffer greatly, if not fall apart. So with that, I will turn it over to Craig Meyer, who's going to lead us and be our moderator for the day. So I thank you very much. And one more last shout out to Glenn Palmgren for the excellent service he did in leading our council. Craig.
All right. Thank you so much, Andy. Yes, and thanks to you and to Glenn for getting us going today and all of the work that you've put into this meeting. I am going to be the moderator for today's panel. I'm coming to you from Southern Wisconsin, so I hope to be with you all for the entire morning. We'll see what our winter storm coming in has in store for us, but thankfully we have plenty of contingency plans in place. Before I turn to the speakers, I also wanted to thank all of the participants who shared questions in the registration about the Prescribed Fire Councils. We're going to hit on a lot of those topics today. The speakers really bring a lot of background that will help answer those questions. A final note, just to echo something that Andy just shared, I've been involved in planning the burning issues for the last 7 years, and along with Jack McGowan-Stinsky from the Joint Fire Science Program's Fire Science Exchange Network side of things. And it's been really great working with the Michigan Prescribed Fire Council, and definitely all the enthusiasm that they bring, as well as the experience and professionalism and openness to new ideas. So this partnership has been really great for us. And today I'm really happy to welcome representatives from Prescribed Fire Councils really coast to coast. And we're going to see a lot of overlap, and but at the same time, I think we have a lot of new ideas and experiences to share. So with that, I would like to introduce Jennifer Kays with the Nature Conservancy in Pennsylvania, who will be sharing her experiences with the Pennsylvania Prescribed Fire Council.
I think you're on mute, Jenny.
Sorry, I tried to do it earlier, I think, before you. Sorry. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Is it the right screen? Can I just check? Is it the slideshow? Sorry.
Yep.
A bunch of stuff just popped up. All of a sudden, I was all prepared. I'm sorry. So good morning, everyone. I'm Jenny Kays. I'm from Pennsylvania. I work for the Nature Conservancy. I'm the fire manager for Pennsylvania and Delaware. I've been working in fire for almost 20 years, and I've been with the Conservancy for 23 years. I've also been involved with our fire council since before it started, And so I hope that I can answer questions that you have. We started in 2005. We got together a small group of us with the Pennsylvania Game Commission, and we wanted to know, and we were trying to figure out what should we do about prescribed fire. Was it important? Should we, develop a council? And it turned out that we didn't really know. There was no information about who was burning, what amount of acres were being, managed. And so at the end of the meeting, we decided we needed to do a survey before we could move forward. So we did the survey. It was 30 questions. We sent it out to 38 agencies. We got 117 responses, and it turned out 43% of the responders were using fire. And it was a surprise, I guess, because everyone that was using it, and for the same reasons we use it today, it was all under the wire. In Pennsylvania, to intentionally set fire to the woods was considered a felony at the time. So in 2007, after we got the survey and we decided who was using it, we came together in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and we formed a council. And for that meeting, we brought in 2 speakers from the 2 councils that we thought were the most successful at the time, and that was Michigan and Florida. And Jack came and spoke to us. That was our very first meeting. And we learned a lot on some of the successes and some of the failures. And at that meeting, we named our officers. We set up a mission and goals for our council. And our mission is, the mission of the Pennsylvania Prescribed Fire Council is to promote the exchange of information, techniques, and experiences of the Pennsylvania prescribed fire community, and to promote public understanding of the importance and benefits of prescribed fire. We've always thought about education as a big part of what we do. So then in 2008, we held our first annual meeting, and we had it in State College, which is in the center of the state. We had over 300 people come to that meeting. It was way above our expectations at the time. We had people from many other states come in and our surrounding areas, and it was really the start of everything. There was such energy and enthusiasm in the meeting, and it really created the momentum to begin to draft new legislation so that we could actually use prescribed fire in our state. And the other good thing was we made enough money to have like a little nest egg, and we began hosting trainings. So in 2009, our Prescribed Burning Practices Act was passed, and we also had developed our training and standards. So that year, 2008 to 2009, was busy. A little bit of our timeline here for the legislation. We had our first draft introduced in August of 2008. There was a couple of amendments and resubmissions, but it passed in July 2009, unanimously, bipartisan support, and was signed into law. So it basically took 1 year from introduction to passing. But don't let that fool you. That was a heavy lift, and there was a lot of people who worked on that. And the purpose behind this act, and this is what we adhere to, is the purpose of this act is to encourage the continued use of prescribed burning for fuel reduction, ecological, forest, wildlife, and grassland management purposes. Kind of sums it all up. The training and standards were also developed during that year, and I was on that work group, and we met very frequently, and they were very difficult meetings. There was people from different sides of this, and in the end, I would say Pennsylvania's standards are pretty tough. They're almost identical to NWCG. What we were able to do was take some of the W's out and make them RX or I's. So the goal was that a person coming up in training in our state could get through all the test books in state and not have to travel. Our training and standards have been changed, I think, 3 times since then. We have, and when there's a need, we reorganize a training and standards committee. It's usually for a specific reason. And I think we redid our ICT 4 book was the last one where I think we added a W instead of removing it. But it's a flexible thing. We can go in and work on it again. Yeah, but I think that it's pretty robust at this point. So the next big thing that happened was in 2014, we became a 501c3. I was chair at the time, and we hold trainings every year, and that actually started right after we finished our training and standards. There was like a backlog of people who had already been burning, and we acknowledged that there was experience out there. So we had this whole process where you had an experience log, and what level would you be assigned, an FFT1, are you a firing boss, etc. But we wanted to follow up with the NWCG courses that would coincide with that. So, you know, everyone who was an FFT1 needed an S131 class. So in those first, and we gave 3 years for people to get the training to match their experience log. And we were busy. We were putting on 6 or 7 trainings a year for those 3 years. And as the coordinator or lead for a lot of those classes, we had upwards to 60 people in almost every class. Now, we were also charging for classes at the time, not very much. And if you were a member, you had a reduced rate, I think maybe $50 for a class. But we had built up quite a bank account at that time. And had become a lot of concern over our treasurer, you know, potentially being liable for something. And, you know, we're all volunteers. So the recommendation of a lawyer was that we become a 501c3, and we managed to do that. That what happened that was kind of what we didn't really see was that we were recommended at the time to become a board, an elected board, and we cycle 3 people out. There's 9 people on the board, and every year 3 are done with their 3-year term and 3 more come in. But in that, we kind of lost connection with our steering committee, who had been there from the beginning. And a lot of our federal partners weren't allowed to sit on an elected board. And so in our bylaws, a lot of the power lies with the board, and we lost the connection to the steering committee. And I feel like that was a problem. So now we're in 2021. And where do we go from here? Here's some numbers where we just had our annual meeting yesterday, and Jack was one of our speakers. We have just under 300 members. I think we had 290 registered for our meeting yesterday. There are 9 elected board members. As I just said, every year we lose 3 and we get 3 more. There are 23 still on our steering committee, and I've spent this past year reconnecting to them and bringing them back in, and that looks very promising moving forward. And we have 4 active work groups right now, 1 for our annual meeting, 1 for training, because we continue to host at least 3 trainings a year. We have a communications and outreach. There's so much that can be done with that work group, and we have a private lands burning work group. So our next steps, of course, is the private lands burning question is huge. It's our next big nut to crack. We are working on it. I see movement. I'm hopeful we're going to come up with a solution in the next year, at least the first step to a solution. We need to build up our social media presence and add some new work groups. And we're going to update our bylaws to include our steering committee as more of a voting member. I feel like we lost some of our breadth when we weren't including our steering committee in decisions. So that's what we're looking at to do this year. And here's a couple lessons learned. I would say stay true to your mission statement, revisit it if you need to update it. I think you can drift pretty easily by strong personalities or to get away from what your original goal is. So remind yourself occasionally what your mission is. And for me, the more the merrier. It's a Nature Conservancy thing, but I really believe that the more people from all aspects, from all experience levels who can participate, they have new ideas, they have different perspectives, and I welcome all of that. We really want to hear everyone's perspective, even people who may not, necessarily be proponents of prescribed fire. Right now, we're really trying to figure out a way to engage with our VFDs. We think that's an important group that we have not been able to successfully engage. And so if anyone has suggestions, but we're looking at some way to engage with the volunteer fire departments. Another area that we've been kind of talking about is First Nations. Like, we don't have a rep on our steering committee, but of course Pennsylvania has a history. So we're looking at ways to reach out and bring in, that perspective. So the other thing is understanding the time commitment needed to run a robust council. It does take a little bit of effort, but the more people helping, the less that each person has to shoulder. And there are definitely ebbs and flows to the activity. When we first got started, we were just rocking with, legislation, training standards. We were holding trainings. We were meeting all the time. We were very active. And then it kind of fell off for a few years. I feel the energy is back. We're getting ready to go again. We're going to really tackle the private lands thing. But I think understand that there is a bit of an ebb and flow. People get tired. People get burnt out. And the truth of it is a small percentage of us do most of the work. I don't know how to get around that, but from talking to other people and other councils, that's a reality. And that's all I have. Thank you. I'll stop sharing.
All
I don't
right.
know why I'm not showing up in my screen.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jenny. We do have about 5 minutes for questions for Jennifer. And we had a couple come in on chat already. And since we had 2 about private lands, the one was a clarification of what is the first step you referenced related to pursuing private lands burning. And then kind of a follow-up question of if you could talk a little bit more about a couple of main things that the group is doing to encourage burning on private lands.
Well, a lot of our issues started with just a different opinion on how to engage and how that fit with our standards. Our standards are pretty steep, so it wasn't easy for contractors to come in. I think we all recognize that private lands is the next big thing that we need to do, but our forestry was concerned about escapes and arson, and we've just had to have some meetings, and we've worked through it. And I think right now we're looking at a certified prescribed burn manager coursework with mentoring and oversight with the council. We're just drafting this right now, but at this point we have agreement. to keep moving it forward. And, you know, before that, there was some belief that maybe private burn associations was the way to go. And just a lot of discussions on how to do it and a lot of disagreement. And it's taken several years for us to kind of come to at least one place where we're all intersecting. So I'm not sure if that answered the question.
All right, we'll see if some more come up along those lines, but thank you for that answer. And I think we'll be coming back to the prescribed burn associations in a couple of the other talks, and then also as well during the panel discussion for sure. One more technical question, since we have 2 minutes here. I'm just gonna read it off to make sure I get it right. Did you rely on the PMS 410-1 caveat that agencies can set their own standards to write your own standards? If so, how did you make it work for folks to leave the state to participate in fire?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we set a standard for Pennsylvania, and of course that would be this standard or above. And our big agencies in the state are state agencies. We have Bureau of Forestry and our Pennsylvania Game Commission, and they have incorporated into their own training additional, you know, aspects like you need 5 training 5 training assignments before you can move to the next book or something. Like they had specifics that relate to their agency folks. And I think that the Bureau has, for their people that go out of state, they've moved those people to NWCG specifically. So there is a little bit of wiggle room there for each, you know, like, and the Nature Conservancy who burns here is NWCG, and the other agencies that do burn in the state that are federal, of course, they're NWCG. So we all realize that we actually have our own agency standard that at least meets Pennsylvania or is slightly higher.
All right, thank you, Jenny. With that, again, thanks for your presentation, and we'll look forward to seeing you again at the panel discussion. And now we'll just take a moment to transition. Our next speaker is Laurel Kays, and she will be sharing with us her experiences in North Carolina. Thank you, Laurel.
Are you seeing what I need you to see?
Yes, we are.
Great. So thank you, everyone, for having me today. I'm glad to be here. I'll mention just really quickly, I know my bio is going to go in the chat box, but I work out of NC State Extension Forestry, and I'll be talking mostly about North Carolina today. But I do work regionally on a couple different projects with the Southern Fire Exchange, which is our fire science exchange network, as well as with a group called SURPASS, which is a partnership with a bunch of folks centered around military installations. So I do work regionally across the South, so that I know that Jonathan is going to talk more about that. So I have not included it here, but if you have questions about that, I may be able to answer it in some capacity as well. So I'll just talk very briefly about a quick bit of background, a little bit of history about our council, what our organizational structure looks like, some of the work that we do and some of the issues that we try and focus on, and then just a couple other thoughts to close up. So none of this will be very groundbreaking to most of you, I think, but just wanted to cover very quickly that in North Carolina and the South broadly, we have large amounts of private lands. In North Carolina, especially, the military is a huge landholder and a huge partner in a lot of what we do. Fire suppression is, depending on who you ask, the top or in the top 3 or 5 threats to listed species or other rare species. And restoration of fire is pretty widely across agency and organizations agreed to be a key component of restoring longleaf, red-cockaded woodpeckers, and quite a few other ecosystems and priority species. So our council was formed in the early 2000s, and I'll talk about specific dates in a second, but to address a lot of the same challenges that we talk about today. The discrepancy in what fire is needed on the landscape versus what is currently being used, especially on private lands. the lack of education, both in the general public and also among stakeholders like policymakers about how beneficial fire is and how necessary it is. Growing populations and an expanding WUI. North Carolina has been a fast growing state, one of the fastest growing states for quite a few years. And we're seeing that especially in places like the Western Mountains and the Eastern Coast, where it's particularly affecting and expanding wild and urban interface. And of course, limited burn windows, which have always been an issue and are increasingly so as climate change makes things quite a bit different. So the council itself was established in 2006. But it grew from a group that called themselves a fire team that formed a couple years earlier to address, again, a lot of those same issues. The lack of information about prescribed fire among quite a few different stakeholders, air quality issues, and also concern about air quality issues that wasn't necessarily correlated with the issues themselves, as well as liability and insurance issues. And so our mission has a couple notes on it. Fostering cooperation, making sure that all of our stakeholders are working together to the best of their ability, both in burning and in messaging and other activities, to making sure that we're optimizing burning opportunities and burning as much as we're able given conditions, promoting public understanding, as well as, again, those other stakeholders like government entities and the media, making sure that we're using the best available science in our management and that we're keeping up to date about what that science says and changing our management when the science says we need to. And doing all of that in the service, in part, of reducing the risk of damaging or dangerous wildfires. So founding members at the time, again, included a lot of the same folks who are involved today, although there are some differences. That included private consultants who do burning on private lands for a fee as part of their business model, NGOs like the Nature Conservancy, what is now Quail Forever, but at the time was Quail Unlimited, the North Carolina Forestry Association, which is a little less involved now, but for our forestry agencies and organizations broadly are very involved. All of our state agencies were involved. That includes wildlife, forestry, our air quality regulator folks, our natural heritage program, as well as state parks, and all of the various federal agencies, including the various military branches that have installations across the state. So in terms of organizational structure, we are a nonprofit corporation. We are a 501c3. And to be honest, I'm not exactly sure when we became one versus when we were created as a council. But we have been a 501c3 for quite a while now. Our leadership and our board is selected by elections at an annual meeting. We do allow folks to vote either in person or via email. And we do try and have those elections be minimally competitive. We find that people are a lot more willing to put their name on a ballot if the ask is, hey, we think, we really need someone to run for vice president. Are you interested? And to be able to give them, we're not excluding people from running. And we do sometimes have competitive elections, but a lot of times it's more sort of asking people to take on the position and they are the only person who ends up running. So the leadership of our board is headed up by the vice president. So our vice president is elected. They are the person who organizes the annual meeting and chairs the annual meeting committee that year that they are elected. And then the following year, they cycle off into being president, which is just a sort of regular board position. And then that third year, they are a past president advisor, which again is just a board position. We also have 3 at-large board members, of which I am one. We have a secretary, we have a treasurer, and we have other sort of miscellaneous positions as we need them. Our treasurer has been in his role for, I think, maybe 4 or 5 years now, and he's finally ready to cycle off and focus on some other things. So the person who's taking over that role, we created a sort of assistant treasurer position for her so that she can have this year, while the treasurer is still on, to sort of figure out how things work, make sure she has all of the information before he finally cycles off. And we also have a website and sort of communications manager who we do pay a little bit. She does work in a fire-related role, so she's involved with the council as part of her professional position, but she also does some sort of side work related to website managing for different folks, including us. And that's really helpful to be able to just funnel everything to her to put on our social media pages, send out by email, put on the website, and to know that she's going to be able to be compensated a little bit for that. We have quite a few different committees focusing on education outreach, membership, development, which is financial work, policy, training, implementation, and the annual meeting. The activity of those committees ebbs and flows, like Jenny was mentioning, according to what the need is, which of these things are really sort of high profile or need to be addressed, as well as whether we have people to actually chair those committees and make sure that they are kept active and up to date. So as of now, most of our committees are active. The education outreach one is probably the one that's the least active, but we're trying to get that one sort of back up and running. For our membership, our dues pay for, like a lot of us, I think, most of our work in the council. The amount that we receive varies a lot depending on our annual meeting location. We cycle the annual meeting location around the 3 regions of the state. So the mountains, the Piedmont, and the coast. So it cycles each year, it moves to the next region. So all of that to say, it's hard to tell exactly how many members we have because our annual membership lasts 1 year beginning August 1st. So we typically get maybe 150-ish annual memberships each year, but we have far more sort of involved folks than that because a lot of people only pay their annual membership if they're going to the meeting because that's part of the fee for attending the meeting. But we do also offer a lifetime membership, so people can just pay that $150 fee, come to all of the annual meetings for free, not have to pay again. And we also offer a student membership that's $25, lasts 4 years, regardless of when the student graduates, that we are trying to get more folks to take advantage of, but it's been a bit of a challenge to get students as involved as we, I think, would like them to be. A couple of the things that we work on and issues that we are currently working on or have focused on a lot in the past. Prescribed fire acreage reporting is something that we really struggle with. So in 2016, the implementation committee worked on a big project to get GIS data based on prescribed fire records from various sources that resulted in part in that map that you see on the screen. And this is still something that we're talking about, of trying to get a good record of who is burning where and why they're burning, the purpose and sort of the intended effect of that fire. So this is something that we're still talking about potentially hiring a graduate student to do some research on. And there's also some region-wide efforts focused on fire mapping that we're looking to see what happens with those. We still do work some on the policy, rules, and regulation side. I would say that that's less of a focus. And that's in part because we have other entities in the state, like the Fire Environment Working Committee, that deals a lot more closely with some of that policy and regulation and rule work. But there is also a lot of crossover between folks who serve on our board or who are active members or parts of committees and folks who serve on some of those other entities like the Fire Environment Board. Awards and recognition are really important. It seems kind of a silly, relatively small part of what we do, but people really enjoy being recognized for their work. So we have, I think, 5 or 6 awards that we give out at the annual meeting every year, including one for each of some of the more active agencies like the State Forestry and Wildlife Agencies for their Prescribed Burner of the Year award. We also work a lot on information exchange. Again, Susan is the woman who manages all of that, making sure that our members are kept up to date about various things going on in the state and at the regional level by social media, emails. We try and put out a newsletter roughly twice a year. The Education and Outreach Committee has been sort of quiet lately, so that's one of the reasons we're trying to get that back up to date, is to get back into doing that on a more regular basis. And lately, we've also been focusing a lot on public outreach and being involved with a lot of the public outreach work that has been going on across the state, and making sure that we still do have the widespread acceptance of prescribed fire that we really rely on to burn as much as we do. So these are pictures from various fire festivals that are held across the state. They're really fun events. The pictures in the lower left are from one in Wilmington, North Carolina, that draws about 5,000 people every year. They are exactly what they sound like. They're family-friendly festivals in areas where we want to make sure prescribed burning is really well promoted, well accepted, and all of the booths and activities are related to fire and the importance of fire. Weather permitting, there's a live prescribed burn at most of these. You can see on that lower left, that's Miss Wheelchair, North Carolina, being pushed along by the mayor of Wilmington, North Carolina, to light off the prescribed burn at that fire festival. So those are events we try and really promote and encourage and get our members to participate in to continue to have that public acceptance of prescribed fire that we need. Training is always a big focus, especially these days, how to harness those virtual platforms and how to use those both while we're still in COVID and also moving forward to increase access to training opportunities. So we held our annual meeting virtually this past year. That went really well. We were originally planning in April a prescribed fire and hardwoods workshop, which got converted into a virtual webinar that I hosted through the Southern Fire Exchange. That again went really well, got a lot wider attendance than it probably would have in person, but obviously there's a lot of trade-offs for that. But again, working to figure out what those virtual platforms can look like once we are allowed to go and see people again, and working with entities like the North Carolina Forest Service to try and get their certified burner course, which they usually hold 3 or 4 times a year and fills up within days every time. So talking with them to try and get that taken virtually and then have the field component held in various parts of the state. So talking about, again, things like that to use these virtual platforms that people are now more accepting of and more willing to consider to increase the reach of our training opportunities while still not giving up the fact that we do want to meet in person and that sometimes that's really crucial. So just a couple other sort of miscellaneous thoughts that didn't necessarily fit anywhere neatly in what I've talked about. I think it's really helpful that our council is pretty intentional about including a variety of skill sets. I'm obviously biased in this because I work out of Cooperative Extension, but I think it is really helpful that we typically do have some involvement from Extension or other folks who do communication and outreach really involved in the board and in committee roles in the council. Obviously, we need people who have practitioner experience and who really understand the issues that practitioners are facing. But some of those of us who work more primarily in outreach and coordination also have some really important skill sets related to cat herding that I think are really helpful in making our council work well. Again, this next one, I'm clearly biased because I'm typically one of the younger people in the room in the fire world, but that is another thing that we're looking at. One of the things that helps make our council work so well is that we do have a lot of those same people who helped found the council in 2006 are still actively involved in the board. And that institutional knowledge is hugely helpful in how we do things and in making sure that we're not recreating the wheel, making sure that we know what we've done in the past. And so including younger people in those leadership roles to keep that flow of institutional knowledge is really key and important. We do need more landowner and private lands representation. So we do have folks like prescribed burn coordinators or folks who work very closely with private lands groups, very involved in the councils, but not a lot of private landowners themselves. And I think that's something that we're looking at trying to beef up. That last one won't come as a surprise to anyone, but I've helped coordinate used to help coordinate when we could see people, a quarterly happy hour for folks in the middle part of the state who work in fire to get together. We usually were able to get a partner to cover a couple beverages for folks who came. And that was really helpful to sort of just get people together and talking and hanging out between those annual meetings, which people always do look forward to. So I know I'm short on time, so I'll wrap this up very quickly. But looking to the future, we're facing a lot of the same challenges that I've mentioned a couple times. Capacity and liability, burn windows. That picture is from a really great paper that came out from quite a few different folks looking at burn opportunities and burn windows and how those are going to be increasingly restricted under climate change, and that's already happening. And funding to do all of this in an environment where the question often is, why do you deserve the funding you have, as opposed to, oh, you need more money to do this. And the last thing I'll say, and the last thing that our council's really trying to think about is diversity and inclusivity, and the fact that if our fire community is going to grow and going to adapt and continue to be successful in the world that we're moving into, that has to include expanding who's part of that community and talking about why those people aren't currently here and addressing those issues. So I'm working with a few folks on our council to talk about that. We met with the International Association of Wildland Fire folks who came up with their diversity and inclusivity policies, to talk with them a little bit about what they did, and are trying to come up with a plan for our council to address some of these issues in a way that is meaningful and that is more than just window dressing. So with that, if we have time, I can take a question or two. Otherwise, we can definitely just wait until the panel.
Thank you so much, Laurel. And we do have a couple of minutes for questions, or if there is anything you wanted to hit a little bit more in depth. But I have two questions that came in from the chat. One of them is related to you mentioning working with graduate students, and what are some of the funding strategies or plans for graduate student-led projects that benefit the council's mission? Can you tell us some more about how that has worked?
Yeah, so I'm honestly not exactly sure how they funded that, the 2016 effort, but I think that we have a couple university professors who are very involved with the council, and I'm pretty sure that that was a result of funding that those university professors were able to find to carry out that priority that the council had talked about. So that is definitely helpful. We also have built up a good little nest egg over the years, and are actively talking about ways to spend that in strategic ways that would be helpful to the state. And that's one of the things that has come up, is potentially a graduate student, or sharing the cost of a graduate student with someone like one of those professors to work on some of this reporting stuff.
And I know one of the activities that goes on in the Southeast that people in other parts of the country have been really interested in is the Fire Fest. Fire Festival. I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about how those come together and some of the benefits that have been seen from that, or the challenges.
Yeah, so when I am done, I'll link in the chat. Southern Fire Exchange did a webinar about planning a fire festival with with two different organizers. The folks who organized the Wilmington one that I mentioned, as well as one in Florida, that has some really great information, as well as a website that we put together with some information about how to do that. But they're obviously really fun. Everyone enjoys them, and they're a really great way if you have a location where you really want to promote prescribed fire. So Wilmington, for example, is a place where there's a lot of fire around Wilmington, and it's also a very quickly growing place. It's on the coast. The folks who are moving there, by and large, a lot of them are, retirees from other states. A lot of them aren't people who are necessarily familiar with prescribed burning. So the biggest benefit is really just having a large scale public festival where you can get not only land management folks together, but also their sort of local soil and water district, the city leadership. The mayor of Wilmington is really supportive of that festival, and he comes pretty much every year. So being able to get that is huge. And from the data that we have, the folks who run the Wilmington one specifically are really intentional about every year doing a raffle to make sure that people actually fill out an evaluation, or as many people as possible fill out an evaluation. And so we have some pretty good data that it does impact the way people see fire. And that, the family-friendly booth stuff is really helpful. We share a lot of information about fire, but there's really no replacement for getting hundreds, if not 1,000+ people able to see what a very small but still a prescribed burn looks like, and see how intentional it is, and see all of the equipment that goes into that. I think it just really helps cement for people that we're not just walking around the woods chucking matches, that this is something that is well understood, that is planned, and that every maybe not every, but the vast majority of agencies and organizations that they know and various ones that they trust are really supportive of this. And I know that went on pretty long, but I'll just mention one more thing, that we also do across the state sort of smaller scale versions of these fire festivals. It doesn't have to be a 5,000 person event. A lot of these that we do in various areas are sort of smaller scale workshop type things with just a couple local agencies, but still that live burn component, I think is really helpful when it's at all possible.
Excellent. I guess this hasn't come up on the chat, but this does remind me, I saw a great presentation on fire festivals as well at the National Cohesive Strategy Conference back in 2019 in Massachusetts. And I was wondering then, since we have a minute or two here, are you also involved, is the Fire Council involved with planning for the next one in North Carolina? And are there going to be hybrid or virtual options for people to join there as well if we're not able to travel?
Yeah, so, and I'll say the Fire Council is sort of involved in the sense that we help promote it. There have been a couple that we've financially supported in small ways, but a lot of our involvement is just encouraging partner agencies to be a part of it. And there isn't just like one, there's quite a few across the state and varying sizes of like those smaller workshop type events, all the way up to that Wilmington Festival that regularly gets thousands of people. And that Wilmington Festival did do one virtually, and I'll also link their website in the chat. It was really cool. It was a lot of sort of video stuff. They had a little scavenger hunt for kids that you could go out and do. They had a lot of like Facebook Live videos, including I think a couple that were from folks doing a fire and kind of explaining what they're doing. So they did do that one virtually. I don't know of any other ones that have been done virtually. Most of the other ones just went ahead and canceled. But part of that is because a lot of times they get held in the spring, because tends to be good weather to burn. A lot of times that's the time when people are burning and when they want to make people aware of that. And that also coincided with very beginning of COVID. And so a lot of people just didn't have time to adjust. But the Wilmington Festival is held in October, so they had a little more leeway to figure out what they wanted to do.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Laurel. We are at the top of the hour now, so we'll look forward to reconvening with you during the panel discussion. And now we'll take a 10-minute break, and so we'll be back at 10:10 Eastern or 9:10 Central. So see everyone back here then.
Lenya, you're still muted. And I'm waiting for Craig to come on and Joe, you. We'll start.
Great.
There he is.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Well, it's 10 after, so we're going to get going again here. We have another 50 minutes of presentations this morning, and then we'll have another break and then come back for the panel discussion. So for our next speaker, we're going to be hearing from Lenya Quinn-Davidson from California. And thanks to our virtual environment here, we're getting to go from coast to coast. So thank you, Lenya. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Craig. Let's see. I am going to share my screen and get going. Okay, can you see that, Craig?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great.
That's great.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you all this morning, calling from northwestern California. I'm up in Humboldt County on the coast, and it's very early here, so I want you all to know how how committed I am to your meeting. I got up at 5:30 this morning to join from Pacific time and watch the other talks. And I am an extension person. I'm with University of California Cooperative Extension, but I'm also the director of the Northern California Prescribed Fire Council, and I'm currently actually the vice chair of the Coalition of Prescribed Fire Councils as well, although I'm just about to term out with my time on the coalition board. So today I'm going to share a couple different things. Hopefully it doesn't feel too mismatched, but when I talked to Jack and Craig last week, we were trying to figure out what would be the most interesting things to share from California. And, you know, California's just had a lot of big developments around prescribed fire in the last 10 years. And it all kind of started with the formation of our Prescribed Fire Council. So we formed the Northern California Prescribed Fire Council in 2009. And at that time, it was really kind of the first Prescribed Fire Council in the Western US. There had been one small one formed in Washington before us, a little regional council, but really, when we formed the council in 2009, no one knew what that was in the West. It was this very bizarre concept, I think, to many folks who worked in California on fire-related issues. And we had the good luck to have Morgan Varner in Humboldt County, who had moved out here from Florida and was just in disbelief that more people weren't working on prescribed fire and trying to tackle the issues that we have here, because California is so fire adapted and we have such a need for prescribed fire. And why weren't people rallying around this issue? So I think one of the big things that the Northern California Prescribed Fire Council did during that time was really identify and develop community around prescribed fire. And I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but at that time, people were working in silos and had their own little prescribed fire programs, but there was no venue for people to get together and really kind of share and build a network around prescribed fire as a practice. So it really elevated the conversation around prescribed fire in the West. And we saw other prescribed fire councils form in response to ours forming. So Washington came soon after, Oregon, a Southern Sierra Council here in California, and then a Central Coast Council, and more recently a Bay Area Council. So California actually has 4 active prescribed fire councils, but the Northern California Prescribed Fire Council, as the original one, has really almost acted as a statewide council, because we do a lot of policy work. We brought the TREX, the Prescribed Fire Training Exchange model, to California in 2013. And we do a lot of policy work. So it's, you know, our council is a little bit of a loose coalition. We're not as formal as what Laurel described or even what Jenny described. It's really more of a kind of a loose group of people. We host annual meetings. We take opportunities as they come. And one of our big things that we've been working on in the last couple of years is the rollout of a new state certified burn boss program. So this is a very new thing for California and an exciting development. So I thought I'd kind of dig in on that a little bit and share some of the work that's going on there. Now, the council for many years had worked on and contributed to various legislative efforts. And in 2018, a really important bill passed, Senate Bill 1260, that mandated the development of a California state certified burn box program. And this is similar to other state certified burner programs, although it is called a burn boss program, and it really is intended for experienced practitioners, and it's pretty rigorous. So the curriculum development process happened throughout 2019, and 2020 was really all about approvals and going through all of these, kind of bureaucratic processes to roll this thing out. And it finally just got approved, and we'll be able to start hosting courses this spring. So it's pretty exciting. It's not something that I thought would happen in California, because we have CAL FIRE, who's very uncomfortable with the idea of private people becoming certified for prescribed fire. We just have a lot of interesting dynamics around fire in California right now. But the crazy fire seasons that we've had over the last 5 years really have been able to push forward legislation like this, even against the kind of the political will of our big fire agencies. So it's an interesting time right now. And the benefit of the state certified burn boss program is the part that I think needs some work. It does not change the negligence law in California. So it's not like Florida, where if you become certified, then you enjoy the benefits of a reduced liability standard. It does offer some opportunity for liability sharing with CAL FIRE. And so that remains to be seen what that actually looks like. But I do see a range of benefits that are possible through this. And for landowners, there's a real need for qualified contractors to plan and to lead burns. So hopefully, as we get more people certified and as we figure out what that liability sharing looks like, there will be more opportunities for landowners to hire folks, and also to reduce bottlenecks in cost share programs. So I don't know how much you all work with NRCS and are able to use EQIP funds for prescribed fire planning or implementation, or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We work a lot with the Partners program, that they're kind of getting more interested in collaborating on prescribed fire. So if we're able to point to a certification that's not NWCG, and say these folks are certified to lead these burns, that might open up more opportunity. And then landowners, of course, could become a state certified burn boss as well and have liability relief for their own projects. But we don't see a lot of landowners who have that depth of experience with prescribed fire, because of course it just hasn't been in the toolbox here in California for so long for private landowners. And I'm going to talk a little more about that in a minute. I also see a real benefit for private or retired fire professionals. We have a strong need for a certification that's for folks who don't work for fire management agencies. And so this will fill that niche. And, it might open up potential access for prescribed fire insurance and for that liability sharing piece with CAL FIRE. So I see it as a real opportunity for private folks to open up their own personal portfolios of the work that they do and add burn planning and burn implementation to that list. And so I'm already getting a lot of calls and interest from private forestry practitioners or restoration groups who want to add prescribed fire to their list of services they offer. So it's pretty exciting. The council, as this kind of regional or statewide body that works on these issues, has taken on some interesting legislative priorities this year, and some of them are tied to that state certified. So I'm working a lot right now on some bills that will be introduced to the legislature in this cycle. And one of them is proposing to tie a gross negligence standard to the state certification. And this is pretty controversial. I don't have high hopes that it'll actually make it through and pass, but I'm going to keep working on it, because I think it's one of the single most important things we could do for California as prescribed fire future would be to have a gross negligence standard tied to that state certification. I believe the certification is rigorous enough, and it would just really open up more opportunities. So we do have a state senator who's behind that issue and going to introduce that bill. There's also strong interest in trying to open up more insurance opportunities for prescribed fire. In the West right now, and I'm sure where you guys are too, there are very few opportunities to insure prescribed fire projects, whether you're a landowner or a private burn boss or, anyone working on these issues. If you're an NGO, there are close to no insurance options. And so it makes it really hard for the private sector to get more interested in this work, and even for landowners to want to take that risk without knowing that they have some kind of insurance. So there's another bill that is working on that. And there's a whole working group of folks in California who are trying to explore opportunities for different types of insurance pools, maybe based on the same model that we use for the utilities in California. It's this really dynamic conversation right now, and hopefully we can work something out. Another big thing that you all are probably seeing in the coverage of California's fire issues and of prescribed fire in California is cultural burning. And, where do tribes fit in? Where do Native practitioners, how do they fit into this conversation? And what about tribal sovereignty? As we're developing things like a state certified burn boss program, how are we considering the rights that tribes have and that Native people have to use fire without having to get permits and without having to become certified? And we need to keep that front and center and really look to and consult with our Native partners in prescribed fire here in California, because there is so much depth of knowledge, and it's really important that we keep their interests and their ability to use fire at the forefront of our work on this. So that's a big conversation, and I'm working quite a bit with a couple tribal groups on some policy issues. That's really where most of my work with the tribes is, on policy and less on the actual implementation of burning. And so it really just brings up this question in California right now. I think one of the most important topics that we're grappling with is just how to best enable prescribed burn associations, cultural burning, community-based burning. That's kind of an umbrella for all of those things. And historically, the Prescribed Fire Council had a strong focus on public lands, because we have so many public lands in California. And, we have a ton of federal lands, and our council actually has really strong representation from the Forest Service and the National Park Service and CAL FIRE. And we've had this real public agency perspective. And the last couple of years have really been about shifting that a little bit and bringing more of a private lands focus and a community focus to the council. So there has been just this huge rise of prescribed burn associations in California in recent years. And it's really exciting. It's not really the same as the council. I'd say the one thing, there are a couple of us who work in prescribed fire who overlap with the council and the PBA development. And of course I do, because I lead the council and I'm kind of leading some of this PBA work in California. But it really is kind of a different set of people, which is neat to see. I think we're expanding our prescribed fire community again. And I really got inspired by folks in the Great Plains. In California, we had the council, we were doing all this kind of neat policy work and training and bringing Trexes in. But there was still this missing piece of how do we actually empower private landowners to bring prescribed fire back into their toolboxes. And I started becoming more familiar with John Weir's work and all the neat stuff that's going on in the Great Plains, and looking at some of the, like on this slide, looking at some of the statistics that are coming out of the Great Plains from these prescribed burn associations. And so in 2017, my colleague and I decided to go out to Nebraska and burn with some of these PDAs and really try to get a sense of how this works. This is basically a foreign concept in California, that you would have folks that look like these pictures, burning hundreds of acres a day. That's not something that we have had in recent years or in recent decades in California. So we actually have a history of that, early in the 20th century, of range improvement associations and things like that. And of course, for millennia, Native people burning in California. But in recent decades, not a lot to point to. So that time in Nebraska was really interesting to see. They put out a call, and within a couple hours, 40 people in pickup trucks and on ATVs in their jeans and their cowboy hats, and doing these really large scale burns and having great success. So we came back from that trip And we decided that there was no reason why we couldn't do that in California. So we formed the Humboldt County Prescribed Burn Association here in my home county. And we started doing some burns that, like, 2 months after we got back from Nebraska, we hosted our first burn, really as kind of a loose model. We hadn't formed a PDA yet, but we had success with about 3 burns that year, and decided in 2018 to really officially form the first prescribed burn association in California. And the momentum and interest has been huge. We have about 80 paying members. They pay $25 a year. I'd say half of those are landowners, and the other half are just community members who want to be involved and want to get out, and it's fun, and it's like their only opportunity to experience prescribed fire. So we can't keep up with the demand, basically. There are so many people who want to be involved, and so many people who want to get out on a burn, that we're like, we need more burn units. Our planning ability to plan burns has been outpaced by the interest from the community. So it's just really, really exciting time to be working on this. And it's a really loose kind of collaborative group, community cooperative, neighbors helping neighbors. We have diverse membership here in our county. It's been neat to see the confluence of people who come out for these burns. It's, old ranchers. We've got small timberland owners, back to the lander, kind of hippie types, pot growers, you name it, academics, kids from the local university. We have all these different people coming together who want to use prescribed fire, and there's never been a place for them. So we're finally giving them a venue to learn about it, and to hold the drip torch, and to actually meaningfully be involved. We're not doing a thing where we have them like stand on the sidelines. It's really, how can we bring you in, keep you safe, but really have you be part of it. And we bring in private contractors a little bit. For some of our more complex in-season burns, we'll bring in a private burn boss to lead the burn. We certainly have hired burn bosses to write burn plans. And then I'm with Extension, as well as my colleague, Jeff, who's kind of my partner in crime in all of this. And so we're able to make every burn an outreach opportunity, a training opportunity. And we put in research plots on a lot of our burns, to better understand if we're meeting our objectives. We have a burn trailer, and this was something we saw in Nebraska that we got pretty excited about. So when we came back, we raised a bunch of money to build this awesome burn trailer that's just full of tools and equipment. We have 42 radios. We bought our own radio frequency. I didn't even know that was a thing, but we were able to buy our own countywide frequency. And then we have free equipment checkout for all of our PBA members. So people can come borrow a leaf blower for a couple days to put in a fire line, or they can, come pick up what they need. Or we do our more coordinated burns where we actually bring the burn trailer out, and then, we're kind of in charge of it. So this fire cache has been a huge boon for our capacity, I think, in Humboldt County. We've done 26 burns since that first one in June of 2017. So these have been some really small burns up to some 350-acre burns, just everything in between. And it's pretty cool because this year-round capacity is allowing us to take advantage of different windows and to really be nimble. We have great burn windows in the winter, but they're narrow, and you have to be ready to jump on them. But I can put out a call to our PBA membership and easily rally 10 to 20 people for the next day, because that's what the beauty of the PBA is. And I as someone who's hosted a lot of Trex events and I work a lot on Trex related stuff, that's a great model too, but it doesn't give us that nimble local capacity that we need to be able to take advantage of those narrow windows. So I really see prescribed burn associations as unique in that way, and providing a really local and flexible volunteer workforce for prescribed fire. And so for us in Humboldt County, we have a lot of different habitat types that we're using prescribed fire in, and Jack and Craig had asked me to touch on some of these. So I'll just cover kind of what our year-round prescribed fire program looks like here. We do some late spring and early summer rangeland burns to deal with some invasive grasses. So Medusa head is one that we have a real problem with here, but it's a late season grass, so we're able to burn it at just the right time, usually for us in late June, and knock it back and not hurt the other grasses. So we've done a lot of burning during that time and had great success with that. We also do a lot of burning for conifer encroachment in our oak woodlands. We have really lovely deciduous oak woodlands that are some of our most biodiverse habitats in California, actually across the Pacific Northwest, but we're losing them at a crazy rate to encroaching conifers that grow up in the absence of fire, overtop them, and eventually the oaks die. So it's kind of the typical progression that we see here on the North Coast. And we're able to get in there with prescribed fire and kill those little firs before they get too established. And this has been one of the fun, like one of the best burning, some of the best burning that we do, because we can do it in the winter with great success. We can treat very large areas with very few people, and it's low risk because these areas are surrounded by forests that are too wet to burn, but we can take advantage of that oak leaf litter and the dry thatch and really have great success. So just 2 weeks ago on my birthday, actually, we got out and burned about 160 acres with 5 of us in these oak woodlands. And it's just the best burning that you can possibly do. It's so fun. We also do
Lenya, I just wanted to jump in and let you know you have 4 minutes left. So
okay.
You're doing great. So.
Okay, great. We're getting close here. We also do some burning in coastal grasslands to reduce brush encroachment. And we do some understory fuels reduction burns too. Though, you know, like I'm showing here, a lot of it is more kind of ecological benefit that our landowners are focused on. We've had a bunch of other random projects, little research burns, blackberry burning. We burned around a vineyard to reduce grasshopper habitat. So it's whatever people bring to the table. And our day of burn costs with the PBA are really low, sometimes zero, because it's a volunteer workforce. We have the equipment, we get our volunteer fire departments involved, and they bring engines and get really critical training. And then some of the costs for unit prep are covered by NRCS and Fish and Wildlife Service and other cost share programs, like I mentioned before. And the core philosophies of this PBA model that we've put out is really that everyone's welcome and has something to contribute. And every burn is a training burn. So this is really inspired by that TREX model, where we're taking each person who comes in and really trying to figure out how they fit in, what their training needs are, and how we can suit those needs. And prescribed fire doesn't have to be expensive or overly bureaucratic. And for California, that's a big statement. Historically, in the last 50 years, it has been expensive and it has been overly bureaucratic. So we're kind of reclaiming that and saying, no, this can be pretty simple actually, and we can take the people like you see in these pictures and put them to work, including my son who's in the upper right. And we're really bringing fire back as a land management tool, not just a fire management tool. So this kind of flies in the face of the fire suppression culture that we operate under in the Western US. And so that's been a big cultural statement. Here are the PBAs that have formed in the last 2 years in California. So since we formed that first one in Humboldt, all the blue counties are places that now have active PBAs. The orange are places that are forming, and the yellow are places that are talking about it. So we're seeing tons of movement here around prescribed associations. And in summary, so the councils really provided that sense of community, that social license, and that important regional and statewide policy work and framework that's allowed for a lot of the work that we've seen in the last decade. The PBA movement is really providing more like local capacity. So they're different, but they obviously are complementary and overlap. And we're just seeing rapid social and cultural change around prescribed fire in California. And it's really thanks to these efforts. I think a lot of this would not have happened if we didn't have the council and if we didn't have this community of people who know and work together on prescribed fire. So that's what I have for you. And thanks for having me.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Lenya. That was you touched on so many things that came in on questions from our participants. So we're really looking forward to having you back for the panel discussion. And now I would like to introduce Jonathan Stober, who's going to talk to us about a little bit different scale and how the Coalition of Prescribed Fire Councils is looking to work with state prescribed fire councils across the Northeast. So thank you, Jonathan.
Good morning, Craig. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. And thank you, Lenya. That's such a ray of hope coming out of California. Some really significant work there. Craig, are we good on screen and sound?
That looks great, Jonathan. Good to go.
All right. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with y'all today. We're going to talk a little bit about a new initiative that started about this time last year, trying to yard up all of the fire councils within the Northeast and really across the nation into regional cooperatives that can coordinate and learn from each other. And one of the upbeats, I think, of our current state of the world is all this virtual environment and how we can communicate and work across all the different organizations that we have, as well as trying to bring together all of the lessons learned by the prescribed fire councils. And so today I'd just like to cover a few things and hook in or basically have an anchor point in the cohesive strategy and talk about that briefly. And then I come at from all this from an ecological intent and ecological imperative. So just give a broad background of the context of the Northeast and the councils that are found within it. And then we will talk about a survey that we put out to the councils within the Northeast and talk about the results from that survey and some things that we're going to do going forward to start bringing a culture of fire back into the Northeast so that we can put more fire on the ground. That is the ultimate goal that I believe all of us share in this endeavor. So with that, we'll talk a little bit about the cohesive strategy as an anchor point. You know, there's a lot of policy. Fire is a very fragmented institution. We have fire departments, but fire as a tool, fire as an ecological imperative is kind of a uniformly, and it's spread across multiple scales, jurisdictions, and the cohesive strategy was implemented and developed to start to bring together all of these disparate groups into these three main goals of restoring fire, maintaining fire resilient landscapes. And we'll plumb that a little bit deeper with the ecology of the Northeast in just a moment. And then bringing about fire adapted communities. There's really great examples of that coming into fruition. And then thinking about how we're responding to wildfires and on a national scale as well as local scales as we move forward. So like I said, fire is multi-jurisdictional. Everybody is sort of involved in it. And the cohesive strategy was to bring us together so that we can organize ourselves around how we're going to manage fire on the landscape rather than being in a reactive pose, rather than kind of being back on our heels with a wildfire event. How can we think about fire and the wildland fire problem in a better way, a more proactive way? So really, one of the intents of this coordinating group of the fire councils within the Northeast region is to reframe this whole wildfire paradigm. You know, from the big woods, from Minnesota to Maryland, and from Missouri to Maine, you have a very ecologically diverse landscape. And as probably was alluded to yesterday, this is an area that without the recent developments in California has had some of the largest wildfire events in history, you know, killing thousands of people, covering millions of acres. You know, look back in time to 1871 and the 1800s and last time we actually had a flu pandemic in 1918, there was a very significant wildfire. So really, we want to start to think about how we can utilize prescribed fire as a management tool to mitigate that risk. At the same time, that helps us get to our ecological imperative line item as well. So how can we take all of these organizations that have their own fire agenda and put all the obstacles that they place in front of themselves and turn those into opportunities and into a vision of how we can work this problem in a more proactive way? Because as I say here, the burden of intentional action has always been greater than inaction. And so how can we utilize prescribed fire in a proactive way? So just a little background and context, and this is really not probably any new information to the group, but you know, we're talking about 20 states within this region, 40% of the population, so relatively dense in some places with population centers. And really a large, when you think about it versus the Southeast, a large segment is publicly owned, but there is a very large contingent of that private ownership. And really, as has been alluded to in the previous talks, private lands is where the action is really. When you have 3/4 of your landscape owned by private citizens, we need to have a way that we integrate private lands and are proactive about that. And Lenya's examples of PBAs, learn and burn events, fire festivals, all those things can be utilized as tools to bring prescribed fire to the private landholders that have operational authority over that portion of the landscape. And so really, this is all hands on deck. Feds and state can help support that mission, and hopefully will too into the future. So as probably Mike Stimbaugh showed you yesterday, probably showed you this map of recurrent fire across the Northeast, and there's really a great need of fire management within the Northeast. Mesophication, you know, is a successional trajectory that most of this landscape is on, with red maple and oaks in a diminishing portion of the landscape. And we really need to think about this from an ecological imperative, as most of us probably in this call do, but it's also a measure of property management and property protection, which is everybody's interest. So when you think about this problem and what we're trying to do is we're trying to sustain those oak systems and those woodlands that were found across this portion of the country. And this benefits endangered species as well as game species that are found across this landscape. And if you look at any of the FIA data that is collected across the Northeastern United States, you know that we're moving away from that desired future condition, and that is because of that fire suppression that has been actively wed to for about the last 80 years. So with that extirpation of fire and across all these communities, you have mesophication of those communities. And as in Nowacki and Abrams' paper, you see the recession of fire across this landscape. And so what we're inheriting right now is a fuel-rich environment, which is shifting away successionally. And it's also setting itself up for some of those catastrophic fire events that have happened in Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and as recently as in 1995, when 5,000 acres burned on Long Island. When you tell people that, they kind of look at you like you're a little bit crazy, but it did happen in 95 that there was a 5,000 acre wildfire on Long Island in New York. And so we really have to make this point to the public as well as fire managers that probably know this, that we're setting ourselves up for more bad times if we don't become proactive in how we perceive and utilize fire on these landscapes. So looking back in time within the GACs, for those that are all within the federal bureaucracy of fire management, know what GACs are. The East has been a leader in fire management, as you all can see by that graph. And there is a great potential within the Northeast to expand fire management. The way I think about it is that the Southeast, the Northeast is where the Southeast was about 20, 30 years ago. When I went through grad school, there was no fire ecology management type class. That started in the 90s, and fire councils really started anchoring in the 90s and have developed out of there. And so there's a really large potential for the East to maintain its leadership role here, and also to bring private lands into the fold and help them establish a culture of fire within the Northeastern landscape. So really we're looking within this coordination group to address some of the tools that have been found within other regions of the country, whether it's PBA and some of the other great examples that Lenya laid out for us that are happening in California. But we need to reduce those barriers to execution. I know we're within the fire culture that's probably of anywhere in all these councils, we're all kind of under the tyranny of NWCG and their regulations and organization of how we treat fire. And we really need to be focused on how we can certify and bring private lands into the fold here, and also have a different trajectory of certification for those folks that are not in this in a professional faculty. So changing that paradigm of wildfire to prescribed fire from reactive to proactive, this is probably nothing new for anybody on the call, but this is the story that we need to tell and to explain to practitioners, to public, to the community at large, to create this culture of fire within the Northeastern landscapes. When you utilize prescribed fire, it's a cost-effective benefit. You're cycling nutrients, you're creating fresh groceries for wildlife habitat to dine upon. You know, we need to be able to make these stories a byline for all the councils as well as the region that we're creating resilient communities here, and the need, the ecological imperative, and the property management that this benefits. So as everybody in this call knows what prescribed fire councils do, and we've seen mission statements from Pennsylvania and North Carolina, and the mission statement of Minnesota is up there at the top. And I think the thing that needs to be pointed out is that prescribed fire councils all have these universal goals of being the advocate, being trying to set law in place so that gross negligence is a standard, trying to help set in ways of certification so that you can get liability insurance. And so this is sort of different than the PBA, which is actually focused in getting people out on the ground and getting them engaged in experiential fire management. The councils really are essential in providing that context and community, and also being the political face of prescribed fire that works with the state agencies, that brings together that culture and community that we can build around this land management activity. So with that said, the national map of prescribed fire councils is illustrated here, and I wasn't able to edit that. And but where we are currently is we have about 37 states. We have Minnesota, which I'm not able to adjust this map, but it's currently back and established again. And we have interest also within the Northeast region in developing councils in Maryland and Massachusetts. And so, you know, we're right at about 10 of the 20 right now, and we're maybe about to pick up 2 more councils. And we're working to advocate for more councils to fill in the white places on the map you see there, so that we can have a council in every state that is being the political face of prescribed fire for that state, and also trying to bring into the fold those practitioners, those consultants, those private landowners, so that we can put more fire on the ground. So at a regional scale, like I said, we started last March in bringing together this coordinating group. And our intent is to help the prescribed fire councils that are in existence, and then also foster the establishment of new prescribed fire councils. And as you can see there, those are all the councils that are represented in the Northeast region. Some, they're doing great work, but what can we do to help them? And so last June, we sent out a letter that asked each of the councils, and we had 9 of the 10 respond and participate in this survey. What are your limitations? Organizational sustainability? Where's your growth pinch point? What messaging, what monitoring or policy do you need in order to help benefit the sustainability of your council and to push it even to a further scope of work? And so what we came back with was that these were the things that came up as needs or things that the councils needed help on. And the goal of this regional coordinating group is to kind of yard up these, find resources, find things that we can do to bring together that community of councils so that they have resources that they can build upon to create a better program. And so with these categories, we basically yarded them up into 4 action items. And so, you know, we heard from you all that council administration and council funding are very critical issues that go with that ebb and flow, like Jenny spoke of just any organization where volunteers and that 20% that carries the load that is always a pinch point within them. And so one of the things that we thought, and we're going to start looking for money for, is to hire a regional coordinator that can be a go-to person for how can we do this better? How can we fundraise to recruit leadership and to try to tie together people across the region to benefit the individual councils? Another thing that was a key pinch point was liability, legislation, risk management, and then how fire needs assessments can become part of the storyline in order to set priorities for prescribed fire, and also basically set the context of liability and the legislation that can be utilized to mitigate that liability. And so many of you probably have heard of the Northeast Quantitative Fire Risk Assessment, which basically outlines your fire envelope for each of the states within the Northeast. And so Georgia was able to utilize a model and create a way of putting prescribed fire on the map by going with the State Forestry Commission to the counties and realizing what the State Forestry Commission does for each county. And as an ask, when the State Forestry Commission went to those county commissioner meetings, they said, hey, we would like to implement a prescribed fire week, and we would like to work towards prescribed fire being a larger portion of our workload, as well as being a part of the community and mitigating the risk to each of these county governments. And so that led towards legislation that helped offset liability, and it also helped set training standards. And so that model could also be used in states in the Northeast. And if we had some states start doing that, we can basically build a cohesive Northeast region where we can standardize some of that legislation and liability coverage, which will also, and if we can do that and also standardize some form of training within the professional sphere as well as the private land sphere, it'll put more fire on the ground. And the thing that dovetails into this is the issue C with fire training and qualification standards, state certification of burn programs. And as many of you know, there's a movement afoot to try to regionally get some fire training standards and qualification standards brought to the scale of the region. And so that is another thing that this coordinating group is working with them and to try to develop those standards and then disseminate that across the councils so that we have an understanding of what, you know, certifications are not apples to oranges, they're apples to apples across the region, so there can be more cross-boundary use and of resources, particularly in the Northeast proper, up there in all the small Atlantic states where fire resources are typically spread really thin, and there's a cooperative and people need to be able to move across state boundaries and help each other when needed to do work. And then the last issue that everybody is touched on at some point in time is education, outreach, and communication needs. And there's a thought that that regional coordinator, that could be a portion of their duties. But when we start looking at fire and fire information, we have joint fire science, we have fire councils, we have all of this desperate information that's spread across all these different places. And if we had a warehouse that was a kind of a one-stop shop in order to get and distribute all the educational materials from the south to the northeast to the west, it would really benefit us in being able to tell our stories and then take other people's information and tweak it a little bit so it fits our local landscape and provides a context for our story of fire management. So moving forward in 2021, and I really appreciate Andy tipping his hat, on February 17th, we're going to have our first quarterly network forum, where we're going to try to build this community of prescribed fire councils, discussing amongst ourselves what we're looking to, what are pinch points, what are things that we need to do into the future to help push our programs forward. So what solutions can we develop? What opportunities are out there that we can tackle as a region, rather than us and, rather than Michigan and Pennsylvania doing their own thing? Maybe there's things that we can work across regionally that help push the whole region together in a more unified manner. And when you do that, we can pool resources and we can, make the ask to U.S. Forest Service or whoever it may be, so that we can say, look, we can have influence across a regional scale, working with the prescribed fire councils. We need this resource to push this initiative forward. And so that's the gist of where we're going. We're basically in our infancy and trying to bring the prescribed fire councils across the Northeast together, and hopefully on the 17th, some of you can join us on that call and we can start initiating that. We hope to have those quarterly calls, trying to avoid the summer fire season out west and get a few of the slower times, except there doesn't seem to appear to be any slow time anymore, where we can gather up as a group and share learned experiences across the councils within the Northeast. So with that, we really want to hear from you. What are the pressing needs that you have? Where's your spot fire currently? And what can we do to help you as an individual council, as well as a region, put more fire on the landscape and help sustain your mission? So with that, Craig, be happy to take any questions you may have.
All right, thank you so much, Jonathan. Yeah, we have time for a few questions here, and gonna take a few that were in the chat box rather than saving those for the panel. One is from Jennifer Case. She was wondering if the regional council effort could provide legal support to the state councils.
In what faculty are we talking about? 501(c) is help in that nature, or are we talking about? I mean, there's a lot of space there that we could talk about.
Okay.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go for it.
Jonathan, I guess I'm looking at just review of our bylaws, our standards, just basic help like that. I mean, we're in the process right now that we're going to need someone to help us with some of our structure, for our council and how it's written out. And go ahead.
Yeah, so I would say Mark Melvin's probably the one that has seen the most of that and could give you better guidance than I could, far as bylaws.
Okay.
That would be who I would go to ask that question.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. One other question that came in for this group, from the surveys, do you have a sense of how many of the councils in the Northeast are organized as 501(c)(3)s versus, just more loosely affiliated?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but the majority are. I'm trying to think of who's not. And I can't come up with anybody because Missouri, Jack might know the answer to that question since he's had, especially in the Midwest. I can't think of anybody that's not actually.
Okay. Yeah, maybe that's something we can come back to at the panel. I know in Iowa's situation, they haven't yet formed a council because the work that they've been able to do informally has kind of met the needs that they thought a council would need. So it'd be great to talk about some of the different models. But with that, we are at the top of the hour. So thank you again to Jonathan and to Lenya previously. We will take a short break and we'll be back in 10 minutes for the panel discussion. So look forward to seeing you all then. We'll be back with our panel in about 1 minute. All right, everybody, we'll get started again with our panel discussion to wrap up day 3 of Burning Issues 2021. Just take a minute or two here to get our panel members back on, and hope everyone had a good break. All right. So one thing I have to say is the discussions, the presentations this morning really got a ton of discussion going in the chats. And so I'm going to do my best to kind of structure the discussion, but I also imagine we're going to have a lot more questions coming in through chat as we go. So we'll definitely try to work toward where the majority of the questions are coming from as well. And for those, if we don't get to your question today, we apologize. There is just a huge volume of things that we could talk about. And everyone's contact information is going to be available going forward. So hopefully this is more like the beginning of some of these discussions than the end. So let's keep that in mind. So with that, one of the questions I had for this group is related back to the structure or organization of all of the councils. Each council, of course, is free to organize the way that works best for them. And there's some questions about the costs and benefits of being formally a nonprofit and 501c3 status, and also related to that, how that affects working with state and federal partners. And I think Jennifer talked a little bit about that, but anyone can jump in on that one.
I'll just mention really quick that I had never actually heard of that being an issue for any of our partners, the nonprofit situation. I don't know if that's just a difference in administration. I don't really know why that is, but it's never been an issue for any folks that are involved in any agency in any capacity. So again, I'm not entirely sure why that is, but working as a nonprofit has worked really well for us.
Yeah, Laura, I would agree. I wasn't clear on maybe what they meant by that question, because we work very closely with the state and even the federal agencies, and we've never had an issue. In what way would it be a conflict?
Is it because I know in California, our federal the folks who represent our federal agencies on the steering committee, they feel that they can't be voting members of the steering committee. So they like to call themselves liaisons to the steering committee. And I don't know what that's all about, but it hasn't been an issue for us in any way. It's just semantics more than anything, I think.
Right. Yeah, I did talk about, we couldn't, once we became a 501c3 and we had an elected board, none of the feds could run for that board, and that was a loss, I felt. But we have maintained also the steering committee, we call it.
Mm-hmm.
and they are included in our meetings. But we just had our big meeting yesterday, and we were able to vote in an NRCS rep. That's the first time. And I had asked about a month ago if we could get one of them, and they pushed it up the flagpole, I guess, and were given permission this time. Not sure what changed.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny, for that. So it sounds like maybe there's some similarities and differences there, but in Pennsylvania, you have a board and then also a steering committee that provides some guidance without having like voting on policies and decisions.
Right. Although the way I like to do it is that although the official vote is from the board, we really want to hear from everyone. And hopefully that influences how the vote is taken. That's not how each chair has done it, but that's how I think it makes most sense.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead.
No, I just don't want to exclude our federal partners. They're so important. They have a lot of experience and they have a lot of background. And I think they're vital to moving forward, and to just say that we can't, include them doesn't make any sense to me. So.
Yeah, and I'll say too, since you brought up the voting thing, we do vote on things. Obviously, that's part of our bylaws, but it is more of a formality, and sometimes we frankly forget to do it. So the way that we functionally operate is much more just reaching consensus and things that make sense to people and things that people are willing to take the time to do. And maybe it hasn't always been that way. I've only been involved for 3 years or so, but it seems to me that that's pretty consistent with how we've done things.
Yeah, that's how we do things here too. We rarely vote on anything. Like there aren't issues that come up that get voted on in some kind of critical way where the liaison status of our federal partners even matters. It's more discussion and collaborative process, I'd say.
Right. So I think a related question here is, what are the best ways that your council has found to increase membership and participation in terms of the numbers and representation of partners on the council?
For us, for the first 5 years or so of our council, we used to host 2 meetings a year, obviously in-person meetings, and we would always move them around our region. So we'd host them in a different location every time. And that really helped bring new partners in from different areas. And we'd always host them in conjunction with a field tour. And then we moved to 1 meeting a year, and that's what we do now. But we still do that same thing of moving around Northern California. And I think that really helps build interest. And we always have a lot of social things too, like happy hours, and we try to make it fun.
Yeah.
I guess I'll talk about our membership. I mean, it's just steadily increased over the years. And so I think we have probably 80% of our members are split between our 2 state agencies. And these are just off the cuff numbers, but I'd say the other 20 is a variety. We have some university and nonprofit and such, but our bulk is the 2 state agencies. But I think way back when we first started, we were at like 70, and we've just slowly increased. And then this year again, we had the highest number. And we tried to do a really good meeting. We had a great meeting, get a lot of good feedback on that. And we're still looking at ways to provide other benefit to members, field trips and webinars, trainings, of course, and whatever else will bring people in. Private lands is gonna, probably bring a bunch in if we can get that solved.
Yeah, similar to what Lenya said, moving our meeting around is really helpful, making sure that each region of the state feels like they're getting something out of the council, feels like they're getting to talk about issues that they care about. The happy hour is key, and we also always hijack some partner into providing transportation from the happy hour location to the hotel, which is a small thing, but makes a big difference for And we don't, no one's getting toasted, but it does make people feel like they can have a good time. And I think it genuinely does help.
I could speak to what they do in Georgia and Alabama. You have good speakers, good program, you have a raffle, you get vendors there, offer continuing education credits. You start throwing all those things in and it makes it worth a consulting Forester or some professional to come there and get some continuing education time, and then also have some sort of a social, whether it's a warm lunch or a field trip. And you kind of wrap that all up into one day, and it really brings people out within those two states.
And I'll mention too, Florida actually has 3 councils. So I think I think at a certain point, it's possible that we may not necessarily split up, but as prescribed fire becomes a bigger part of Western North Carolina, I could definitely see there being some sort of like subgroup out there. And there sort of is with the Fire Learning Network, but just the geography of our state. When we host meetings in Western North Carolina, it's in the eastern part of Western North Carolina, because otherwise it's a 6-8 hour drive for some people to make it there. So I think at a certain point too, if you have an active council and you have a state that's geographically split, having some sort of subgroups within that, or even a separate council, can make sense. And because of the pandemic this year, we did, Southern Fire Exchange helped the Florida folks host their first statewide meeting. And I think we had like 600 odd people on that. But I think that's a real benefit of the virtual stuff going forward, is for those folks who are sort of geographically disparate, it becomes a little easier to incorporate them.
And I know that's definitely been a challenge in Michigan as well. From where I'm at in southern Wisconsin, I'm closer to some of the folks in the Upper Peninsula than the people who are sitting down in the southern lower. So lots of good ideas there. I think related to that and activity, one of the other main threads of question that was coming in was about the prescribed burn associations. So maybe we can shift to that direction. And I'll just start off with, I guess, more of a technical question. There were some questions here about how that affects the council, if the council's involved in terms of liability or insurance, and how they work in terms of organization if you have 40 people showing up to do the burn on a short notice.
Well, I don't know if other folks have input on the council overlapping with the PBAs. We don't really do that in California. Like I said, they're pretty separate efforts. The council is really more of a regional and statewide body that works on policy and training and things like that. And then the PBAs are really much more grassroots and local. I think when it comes to organizational structure and how do you organize 40 volunteers who show up on the day of the burn, it kind of depends on the PBA and on the people who are involved. Like we have a couple people here in Humboldt County, myself included, that feel pretty comfortable in that environment and being on the fly and kind of developing an org chart that morning. And we work with some really great private burn bosses who have a lot of experience with Trex and with, just working with people who they don't know as well. And we just take our time and really try to assess folks. Of course, now that we're a few years into this PBA, we do know most of our PBA members and what their skill level is and what they're comfortable with. And, we can plug them in appropriately. But as new PBAs sprout up around the state, they're just having to take their time and kind of figure out what their local capacities are and who brings what talents to the table. And as you figure that out, it becomes easier and easier. Yeah, it takes some creativity, I think, but it's doable.
And we're hopefully pending funding, which we think is pretty likely. We we work with a lawyer here out of North Carolina on some liability stuff and have for a while. And his plan for his next phase of work is to put together a resource about some of those implications of how the PBA is legally structured and the implications for that for liability. So we're hoping in the next couple years we'll have a document like that to share with folks who may be curious about some of the more formal legal options for PBAs.
Yeah, we've been working with the lawyer here in California too on some similar pieces and for release of liability forms and things like that, because we have every person who shows up on our PBA burns sign a form, and we have formal agreements between the landowner and the burn boss and the PBA about who's responsible for various things. So that's helpful.
All right. Let's see, lots of questions to track on here. So let's see. Yes, kind of related to something that we're talking about here today as well. And this might be a lead into the Northeast region activities, but have your councils ever been involved with training? Let's see, that says intra-council. So do you have training within the council in leadership, relationship building, or trust? And if so, do you have recommendations about what works?
We don't.
We
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we
No,
don't.
same answer. We haven't done anything like that.
But I
Now-
do think having that institutional carryover of, we are so lucky to have like people who have been involved with the council since its inception. That is really helpful in terms of some of that sort of continuation of work and filling people in on what has been done in the past. It's not exactly the same as that question, but I think it's similar.
Okay. Yeah, and if there are any follow-up questions to that one, please put those in the chat and we'll pass those along to the panel. Okay. Let's see, in your opinions, what are the best paths forward for the fire councils to build more capacity in terms of putting more fire on the ground? And what's most lacking at this time? Is it training, equipment, personnel, all of the above?
I think for Pennsylvania, I think the state agencies are doing a pretty good job. So for us to get more fire on the ground is to figure out the private lands piece. And, you know, we've been looking at this for a few years. We looked at the private burn associations, and I think I had a conversation with Lenya a while ago, and it just sounds really fascinating. I could talk and listen to her talk about the successes they've had all day. It was not widely accepted here as a good path forward for us. You know, there's a lot of people at the table, and our state that owns fire basically is more risk averse, and I can't imagine, like even now as we go through it, there's still, they would not want people out there without NOMEX. They would not want people out there without 130, 190, and you can argue that all day. They're just pretty stuck on some of that right now.
Jenny, I mean, our state agency feels the same way, but we've been pretty firm in kind of knowing what our rights are as private citizens and just saying this is what we're going to do. If, you know, no matter if you're uncomfortable with it. So in Pennsylvania, what are the rights of citizens to use fire? Like, how does that, does a state agency get to say that people can't do it without?
Yeah, no, you can burn without following our standards. You just don't have any protections.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually, I say that a lot. You know, when you have some of the NRCS fields or some ag fields, it's truly not very risky. And I don't want to get anybody excited, but so my thought is you can burn that. You could do a PBA. Just be very careful and make sure you're documenting everything. In fact, I've encouraged some of the people we've talked about to try it and document everything and don't screw up. And, you know, the one guy is a burn boss. So it just let's start all these different ways of looking at this. And for us, you need to almost show success to have it be part of the conversation.
Exactly. Yeah, that was what we found here in California, was that, you know, people actually couldn't really conceive of it that much but when we were talking about it. But as soon as we started doing it and showing success, everyone wanted to be part of it. And, you know, are you guys a simple negligence state, or what's your?
I'm going to fail at that answer. I can't remember.
Okay, that's really important. I mean, I think one of the things that we found as we started working on these private lands issues is that key to all of it was really understanding the legal framework. And you know, we'd have CAL FIRE people coming into prescribed fire council meetings and saying that California is a strict liability state and that if anything goes wrong, you're going to be on the hook. And that's not true, you know? And so it took some challenging and saying, actually, no, we are a simple negligence state. And this is what that means. And this is what due diligence looks like. And this is what the protections are. And that's what we brought the lawyer in. And I found that my extension program turned into, like I call it, opening the black box of prescribed fire in California and clarifying what all this stuff really meant. And as soon as we started doing that, the landowners became a little more comfortable. CAL FIRE started saying, oh, well, we're going to have to go back and reread our policies. And then they'd email me later and say, yeah, you were right about that. So there, you know, it became this real, we had to clarify things, and then that enabled us to move forward. But I think their preference would have been that no one ever understand that stuff, because the more secretive it was.
That is really good advice, I think, because I've talked to just people in nurseries or people you meet who belong to hunt clubs or whatever, and they have, you know, had the state or their local forester come out, service forester, and they were told all kinds of things that it's like, well, that's not even true, really. So very good advice, I think, for us to know, because I know there's some smaller conservancies that are burning, and I've looked at their plans and I've seen it, and it's very, very safely done. I have to say that they're not following our strict standards, but I think that what he's doing is not outrageous at all. And yet it has caused a stir, you know, you know, he's going to burn the whole state down, basically.
I'm going to post in the chat a link to a little paper I put together last year about liability in California. And it kind of clarifies our liability law and then talks about specific cases around prescribed fire where liability became an issue and what that looked like. And that kind of thing is super helpful, you know, because people just say the word liability, but no one really knows what that means or what, you know.
Well, there's also a lot of, I think, misinformation where people are told that it's illegal to burn, and it's not, right? It's just, you may not be covered by this set of standards, but it's not illegal. You can burn.
Yeah, and I saw a lot of questions about the PPE issue too. And that's another one where, you know, if you're a landowner burning on your own property, no one can tell you what to wear when you're doing that. I don't know how many of you saw, probably a lot of you are on the same Facebook groups that I am, but John Weir posted a funny thing this week of him burning in shorts, and it caused a huge stir. There was a lot of conversation. I don't know if anyone saw that, but some really interesting discussion about PPE and the different standards and what's safe.
I have some great pictures of PBA folks burning, and I can't use them in anything because they're wearing like Crocs and shorts, which is not what I would be wearing, but works for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I wrote this in the chat, but our PBA does have PPE requirements, and I outlined them in the chat, but they're not, it's not NOMEX and it's not fire shelters. And I think it's important for us to reclaim the term PPE too, and not just assume that PPE always means the federally mandated set of PPE. It's really about what's safe for the work that you're doing.
One resource I would suggest is going to the Missouri Prescribed Fire website. They have a good monitoring program, and they have reports that feed right into their website that show, percent accidents, escapes, and allows you to log your burn in. And so it gives reference to all of the hyperbole around prescribed fire about its safety. Another thing they do really well is integrate their PBAs into their fire council. So they've redone their website. It's really nice. You have a information stream that comes in about prescribed fire in that state and then is reported back out and helps everybody kind of get the same context about fire in that state.
And can I add one more thing, Craig?
Go for it.
Just on the sort of barriers question that isn't related to liability, I think funding is a huge one too. Different scenarios in different states, certainly, but in North Carolina and the South in general, our state agency funding has been consistently slashed and consistently is in danger of being slashed more. And that is a huge barrier. And we're very lucky that our priorities tend to align. So burning is something everyone is happy to put resources towards and work together on, and that's great. But at a certain point, especially as all of these issues like climate change and an expanding population and wild and urban interface keep compounding, if we're going to accomplish the things that those powers that be say they want to see accomplished, there's going to have to be resources put towards that.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue for a related question on this topic. And things are coming in fast and furious still, so get back to that question. So related to what you said there, Laurel, and in other councils, how do you best reach and integrate the little guys? So those who are outside of the state or federal agencies, smaller NGO groups, and is there that kind of tension between the larger agencies versus smaller organizations in your council?
I think we tend to work pretty well with the smaller guys. Sorry, Lenya. You always start talking at the same time as someone else. As someone who doesn't work for a smaller organization, I think that we do a pretty good job. And part of that is that we just have a pretty active council. And for our annual meeting in particular, we do really try and go to the local folks near that site and say, who do you work with? Who are some of the newer stories, the smaller folks that people might not have heard from? We have some resource conservation and development councils out in the western part of our state, a network of nonprofits that are super active and have some grant work from the Forest Service to do fire-related outreach. And so we, brought those folks in for our most recent annual meeting. So we do try, but it's also that issue of like, you don't know what you don't know. And most of the people who are involved in the council are from those larger entities. So I think we try, but if someone from a smaller entity was like, you're actually not doing a great job, I would certainly believe them.
I'm just going to add to that, Laurel, it takes someone to reach out to them, and so this is where it comes back to actually the people involved. When I'm looking at our steering committee, I'm reaching out to Longwood Gardens. I call him up and say, you need to come on here, get excited, join us, and you get them on. But if you don't do that, if that person or someone is not reaching out to some of the smaller groups or conservancies for us, they don't feel welcome. You have to make them feel welcome. You have to make that effort, I think.
I think there's a lot of resources, particularly locally where I am. I've tapped into the Forestry Commission, some conservation easement trust, and get on mailing list of those folks. And you start saying, hey, we'll provide you lunch and we'll do a learn and burn on a private piece of tract. You'll have a lot of people show up. And it takes just a little initiative and a little funding to do that. And if you have somebody that's cooperating with you in a state agency that's actually the fire management agency for that state, and you get a couple natural resource based, whether it's easements or whatever sort of local organization that's around environmental issues, you just start stimulating that interest. In a learn and burn event, you pull in a group of folks, you expose them to that fire event, and that just sort of starts building its own inertia.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's what we did here in California was over the last few years, kind of did a roadshow of workshops, and we don't call them learn and burns, but a similar kind of thing where we do a workshop and then the next day do a small burn. And I think we did, like my colleague and I traveled around, we did, I don't know, probably 27 workshops around Northern California and a few in Southern California too, with that model that just brought in so many new people who, who were excited. And the extension connection really helps because we have that landowner connection and the ranching community and all these folks who don't get touched by the natural resource community as much as, as some others. So I think Extension is a great partner in this kind of work because they really have, and NRCS. Those are two entities that really work a lot with landowners.
I think part of it too is just the institutional structure that all of us who do this professionally can go to a 2-day meeting once a year on a Wednesday and a Thursday, but a landowner probably isn't going to do that, or someone from a smaller conservancy that may have much less capacity that maybe can't afford to do that either. Which I think is also part of the potential of some of these virtual options that we have now, is recording things and putting them up on YouTube or streaming them while we're doing them, to let some of those people that might be excluded from just the functional way that we do things.
Great. I'm going to just share my screen for a moment. So if anyone else has other comments, please keep going. But I just wanted to share what our affiliations looks like for the meeting today. So in terms of folks who registered, today we had, we had almost 340 people registered for this meeting. You can definitely see federal and state agencies are up there. There's all kinds of stuff in there. And then when we're getting down to private landowners and companies and tribal governments, there weren't a lot of folks coming in. Conversely, in the past, when we've held burning issues at a physical site, the federal agency representation was maybe 3 or 4 people. So they've really been able to circumvent or not need to deal with things like travel permission and that sort of thing. So it's been kind of paradoxically here for the virtual has given us more of a federal presence than the other stakeholders. So just wanted to share that for the audience to let everyone know who is out there.
And part of it is collecting the data too. It's great that you have all of those categories. As someone who does outreach, maybe this is just my bias, but I can't count how many surveys I've done of, registration information. What's your affiliation? And there's no education or outreach like role, or there's no, tribal entity role. And so part of it is just asking the questions about who's there.
So I'm going to shift gears a little bit here with the next question. This one is primarily for Jonathan, but everyone else feel free to join in on this. Addressing the private lands, or would you say addressing the private lands issue is probably the biggest issue that needs to be addressed at the national and regional level to address the resilient vegetation goal of the National Cohesive Strategy?
Wow. So there, within those 4 priorities we found with the fire councils, there's several competing important issues that kind of come to the fore. And you have everything from the liability aspect. You have states at different levels and acceptance of prescribed fire management. And then overlaying that, you have a different set of laws in those states. So so that's one kind of set of issues. You have a public and a lot of private landowners in the Northeast in particular that are not engaged in a culture of fire. They, that if any of their ancestors ever lit fire to the woods, they have been long gone from this world. And so there's a huge educational piece to understanding the ecology of the Northeast, and then those private landowners understanding the benefit they could have when it comes to like a game management aspect. So there, within those 4 things that we've identified, you got education, you got liability, and like your fire envelope. You have just basic council management, and then of course the one that I can't remember. Those were the 4 things, and all of those things need to be kind of brought forward in synchrony. None really has more importance than the other. They're all limiting factors within the Northeast is what we've identified thus far. Does that answer the question? There was a lot there.
That was a long question. Let me see if I can break it down a little bit. I think in terms, I'll shift the frame here. In terms of meeting the resilient vegetation goals for the Northeast and nationally, do you see private lands as being the priority there compared to other ownerships in the Northeast?
So yes, they are a priority. I know personally from the federal aspect that there is much too little fire, and then states are very variable in their implementation and pushing fire as a management issue on their piece of land or their landscape that they're in control of. So yes, given that 3/4 of the landscape is owned privately, fire on private is probably one of the largest priorities. States and the feds, particularly the feds, are mandated to start utilizing fire from various, points of contact within the agency. Are the feds doing it? I can point to forests that are not doing it all, and I can point to forests that are doing just a little bit. And when you think about the acreage that they have under ownership, it is usually a paltry percentage of their land base. And I'm not saying that to throw anybody under the bus in the feds, but it just is, it's the fact that we own a lot of land and we do not manage it with fire. And part of that is due to past catastrophes and cultural legacy, like West Virginia had a law similar to Pennsylvania where, it was a felony to do any open burning. It's just in the past 5 years that West Virginia has rescinded that law, and they have not allowed private to do that. They only allow state and federal folks with credentials light a fire in that state. And so there's a lot of resistance and history in this landscape that prevents fire from being used as a management tool. And if we can liberate private lands, that's great, but federal lands need to be liberated all the same, because there's enough resilience to utilizing fire as a management tool that it just isn't at the scale it needs to be.
Yeah, so I think something that you're touching on, and this question hasn't come in, but then is there a role for the fire councils alternatively in giving the state and federal partners more leeway or public acceptance for burning in addition to working on the private landscape? We haven't talked as much about that.
Oh, absolutely. So there's across the board education campaign. You know, Lenya's examples were great for you're going into a place where there is absolutely zero fire culture. There's zero understanding of fire other than through the lens of Smokey, who said that all fire is categorically bad and you can't use it as a management tool or you're going to burn down everything. So at a national scope, at a regional scope, at a local scope, we got to change the focus of utilizing fire as a management tool, being proactive about it, and telling that story to anybody that will stop for the, you know, for the 15 seconds to listen to your in.
It's related to that, one follow-up question then. Are there Northeast states that still do not allow prescribed fire on private lands? The example is New York having an open burn ban from March 15th to May 15th each year.
So yeah, from my example of West Virginia, it's my understanding that if you're a private landowner and citizen in West Virginia, that there's no open burning there. I don't know if Connecticut or Rhode Island have such laws, but it wouldn't surprise me. But, you know, a state like West Virginia had some really bad experiences 100 years ago, and they codified that bad experience so that nobody will do that again. And so it'll take, you know, education like within that state alone and all the states around it to start changing those liability laws, changing those rights so that there is a space for people to practice.
Challenges, yeah, like you said, it's quite fragmented from state to state of
Yep.
what the particular challenges are.
And, you know, one of the goals of the regional conversation is to start bringing those states together so that we're all on the same page. There's several pacts within the Northeast where they share resources. Well, we need to be doing the same thing with prescribed fire, where we're sharing resources across state lines, and we're not held up by certifications. Certifications are standard and credentials are standard somehow, so that people can work across the landscape and not be held up at state lines.
All right. With that, we just have 3 minutes left for our panel. So time has flown by as we expected it to. So hopefully we can continue these discussions in the future and maybe in person sooner rather than later. And I know, again, we have opportunities to continue this with Jonathan's work in the Northeast. So with that, before we wrap things up, I just wanted to give each of you a chance to share what you know, your kind of a final message or your main takeaway that you'd like to give people to go away from this discussion with, and we'll try to wrap it up that way. So who can I put on the spot first?
I'll go first. I just want to thank you all for having me. This has been a really engaging conversation. I think you guys are awesome. I think the main thing that got me excited in this conversation was just that idea of really understanding the laws and regulations in your state. And I think all of us as people who work on these issues should be able to confront untruths when we see them and be able to recognize them and be able to expose the opportunities that other people maybe aren't seeing. So like we should all know what our, you know, like what our laws are and what the opportunities are and be able to excite people around that. And so I think that it was a cool thing that we talked about today.
I'll go next because I just want to say thank you, Lenya, because I thought that was really a good lesson for me to learn. I do work in this, and you can go down your own little wormholes, and that's a basic thing we should all know and do. And so thank you for having me. I enjoyed it. I'm going to follow up with the panel because I wrote down my own questions. It was a very good conversation. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, similar. Thank you for having me. I also feel like I came away having learned a lot, so I appreciate that. And also just wanted to sort of highlight some stuff we were talking about in the chat box of sort of the social component of bringing people into a prescribed fire council. And it doesn't have to be at the annual meeting, but something to consider when we're talking about sort of who is coming to our stuff and who is sticking around in the field, is that those social components also are things that matter and things that we need to be thinking about.
So yeah, I saw a little bit of that in the chat box, so thank you for highlighting that. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Please reach out to me if you have an initiative, have a thought, an idea about things that we can do at a regional scope that will help push fire. I think one of the things that really makes me excited about this is when I actually am in the field able to share a fire event with somebody. If we can do that at a scale, just one weekend at a time, whenever you have the opportunity, people really, really deeply respond to fire. And if you can practice a fire around somebody, expose them to it, usually it brings out something very deep in their psyche. They have an understanding, it just clicks something inside of people that draws you into it, makes you want to know more about it, makes you want to understand how it operates and what importance it is in the world, because it has made us who we are. The reason we have this big forehead is because of fire.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Jonathan. Very, very well stated. And thanks to all of you for sharing your experience, leadership, enthusiasm, excitement for getting other people excited about fire. It's been a great panel, and we've all learned so much from you and could keep this discussion going for hours. But I will now turn this back over to Andy to wrap up the meeting.
Yeah, I just want to express my own personal thanks to the whole panel. Excellent, awesome, great thoughts. I think I'm going to have to go back and just rewatch the whole thing and take detailed notes, because I was just so much going on that, things that I would want to see incorporated into our own efforts here at the Michigan Prescribed Fire Council. And I guess I would just love to take this opportunity, as I have everyone here, to recognize the fact that the leadership of the council is only a small group of people that only have a limited amount of bandwidth and reach. And this is really going to take, more people's involvement to get some of these cool things implemented and on the ground here in Michigan. And so, yeah, if you have any interests, if any of these things kind of excited you and you want to take a lead on it, as a steering committee, as a group of people in charge of our own prescribed fire council, we would be willing to hear any and all ideas. I think that the statement was made about assessing and reassessing our mission statement and where we are as a group and what we want to do. And so any of those ideas that are brought forward, we would just take an assessment of where that lines up with our goals and, how we can proceed from there. So certainly something that I want to bring to everybody's attention is that, we can get all excited and fired up about all these ideas, but in the end, it's going to take, some increased involvement to really do this and implement it. I would love to leave you with a thought here. It's a quote from a book that I've recently read. It's Earl C. Ellis. He's a professor at the University of Maryland in a book called After Preservation. Basically, it states that only to the extent that humanity is able to engineer, design, and conserve nature more actively than ever before will humanity and non-human nature thrive in the Anthropocene. So basically, I think that is recognizing the state of the world and where we are at, all of these mounting pressures from increasing population growth. And I think that all of that is going to make our mission as the Michigan Prescribed Fire Council and prescribed fire councils in general just more difficult. It's only going to get more difficult. You know, we have things like carbon as a concern now. And, you know, do we have the research and do we value fire dependent biodiversity enough to kind of balance that out? You know, we just have an increasing wildland urban interface here in Michigan and everywhere. And all of that is just translates to greater difficulties. And so I think that, you know, we need to recognize that and recognize that we're just going to have to work harder. So with that, again, I encourage everyone to visit our website, firecouncil.org, to get involved. And I definitely want to thank all of our panel members, all of the speakers that we've had, you know, all of the members of our planning committee. This was a joint effort for sure, as is anything that we accomplish as an entity. And yeah, just thank everyone for attending. Please do make sure to check out the evaluation link for today, even if you've done it the previous days. And be on the lookout for some emails to our membership, as well as just a general response to how this event went. And please be sure to fill that out. With that, I've got noon. I don't know if anyone else had anything to say, but I just surely appreciate all of your attention and time, and look forward to advancing the mission of the Michigan Prescribed Fire Council together. Thanks again, everyone.